About 4:30 this morning, and I heard some outgoing shells, very loud, louder than usual. And I felt the building shake, and anti-aircraft rounds or something going off. A lot of shooting. They're shooting from up there across to there.
It can be a perilous road, and more women are in it. Janine DiGiovanni, a journalist for the Sunday Times, has spent more of her life on these streets at home this year. Each day is a struggle to cope with the fear and emotion. Her boyfriend has left her, and her mother has asked her to stop. But she fought to get to Sarajevo and determined to stay, reporting on what she has witnessed. A view of war through women's eyes.
Automatically, as a woman, you're going to have to go to war if you're going to be considered by a lot of men to be worth calling equal.
In a war, of course, it's a very male thing in a way. It's very macho, very chauvinistic in a way, very brash. But I have seen several men break down crying in front of me, and it was the most extraordinary thing.
We've cut the boundaries of the kinds of stories that can be reported legitimately, and that a lot of men are saying, thank God, because those were the stories that A, I'm more interested in, B, I know the audience is more interested in, C, more effectively tell the story.
The kinds of things that become palpable symbols of what war is all about, at times, for women are different than for men.
The women I know who have covered this war in particular have looked for very human stories and have tried to focus very clearly on people.
In the cold and dark Sarajevo curfew, Janine DiGiovanni searches for new words to describe the cycle of violence. It seems a lifetime since she first came.
Nothing ever prepared me for that first Sarajevo. I'll never forget it. I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life. And it was very frightening coming down Sniper's Alley and coming down through the airport and seeing all the buildings destroyed and seeing soldiers on the streets. And I didn't think I would be tough enough.
There is seldom electricity, heat, or running water. And though her hotel room feels like a refuge, it's hardly a safe one. The Holiday Inn was built for the 1984 Olympics. Now it's 200 meters from the Serbs' front line. A third of the rooms have been destroyed, but it's home to every journalist who's covered this war. Janine DiGiovanni describes it as the home of strong characters, big egos, and some very committed journalists.
I talked to specifically about the trams.
She left her Italian-American roots to cover the Palestinian uprising, and the gamble landed her a job at London's prestigious Sunday Times. At 32, she's one of a handful of women to join the regular Sarajevo press corps.
Throughout the day yesterday, there was a marked increase in sniping yesterday. There was another incident yesterday that I want to discuss, more directly related to the media. 2 vehicles from ITN went off into the Serbian side, out beyond the airport. They went by 2 roadblocks. They didn't realize, but they went through 2 minefields. All I've got to say is that there are a group of very, very lucky journalists around this town today. Wherever you're going, don't push your luck.
In May 1992, there was a massacre, shells falling here, and more than 100 people wounded, 17 people killed in what's called the Bread Queue massacre. And it's sad now because most of these things used to be fresh and now they're not anymore. There's a strange psychological thing. You can sit outside in a cafe and you think life's normal, or you can queue up to buy bread, or you can... Even sitting inside, they're not safe. And I think in the back of their minds, this is what's slowly driving this city crazy.
Gospođo, ne možete unutra, dobili ste i šta tražite sad ponovno?
Evo svjedoka.
I šta tražite ponovno?
Možete nisam da zaradim.
Nikad nisi bio
We have to be a witness in some way to what's happening here. We said we'd never let this happen after Germany, after concentration camps. But it's happening now and we're standing by. And if there aren't journalists and there aren't photographers and filmmakers here documenting it, then who would possibly believe what's happening that human beings can do to each other? Hello.
Like all the children of Sarajevo, 13-year-old Zlata Filipovic has seen her share of tragedy. Her girlfriend was one of the 1,600 children killed in this city. Zlata has recorded it all in her diary, a daily chronicle of life under siege.
Do you understand this war?
I don't know why does it start. I know that only that it kills and it's terrible. And it not have sense.
And what did you write about in your diary?
Well, I write about what is happening, about shooting, about shelling, about my neighbors, about my friends who left.
I think the way to cover this story that I found was the best way to cover this story isn't to chase the shells and the military and hang around with the British troops, but to find the human story, the children, the people, the families that are surviving, and to focus very clearly on their lives. And that's the only thing I could put across on paper that I think will make people listen, or will make them cry, or will make them maybe write a letter to their congressman or their MP.
I wrote, Dear Mimi, a slaughter, a massacre, a horror, a crime, blood, screams, desperation. This is a description of Vasa Miskin Street today. 2 shells fell on the street and 1 fell on the market. And my mommy was so near it. She ran to grandmother's home. Dad and I went mad because she was not coming back. At 4:00 p.m., Dad decided to go to the hospital to look for Mama, but a moment later we saw her running over the bridge. She was shaking when she entered the door. I saw massacred people, she said. Horror.
That was a scary day.
Yes.
You think of your diary as a friend
Yes.
that you write
Mimi.
in when you're scared or when you're...
Yes, I can tell everything to my friend.
How is she ever going to forget that her friend was killed in a playground? She saw her parents, who are professional people, a lawyer and a chemist, having to go out on the street and beg for water and beg for fuel. You don't forget those things.
It is good to have diary. You can write, and after you can remember a lot of things, a lot of detail of your life. I remember the life before the war, that beautiful life before the war, with my friends on seaside, and I sometimes cry because somebody took it, and there's no more that life, that beautiful life.
The Sunday Times has 2 journalists on a Bosnia rotation. That means every other month is spent here, and it's become a schizophrenic life. In London, Sarajevo haunts her. In Sarajevo, with her Bosnian friends, she feels guilty because she can always leave.
Sometimes you begin to feel like you're empty inside. Each story is worse than the next. And at the end of the day, you come home and you've just got to keep this little place inside you that is completely yours. Otherwise, I think you'd go mad covering this war.
Once a notoriously bad camper, she now eats canned food and rations her water supply. It's ice cold, but precious. She brings perfume and jewelry to try and feel normal. When the hotel generator works, it seems a luxury. To file her story will mean a 5-minute drive down a dangerous road to get to a satellite phone in the morning. Now it's after curfew and another long night in Sarajevo.
After 70 years, that what he goes there for is to unlock the door. Well, those around him criticize and sleep.
Robbie Wright from an Australian news team is showing the video he's made called Year of Living Dangerously, Sarajevo.
Miracles will happen as we dream.
For journalists since Vietnam, the war video has been a ritual. It's gruesome, but cathartic.
But we're never gonna survive. Brilliant. We get a little crazy.
Okay, let's have the dirty videos. Come on, actually.
After days of relative quiet, Sarajevo explodes again. 600 shells scream down on the city, and even the veteran journalists are tense. Alexandra Boulet, a French photojournalist from SIPA Press, has spent 2 years in Bosnia. Her photographs have appeared in Time and Newsweek. The journalists call days like this bad days, and on bad days, the first stop is Kosovo Hospital.
So why are you still in the shitholes? You couldn't find a husband, no?
I can't find a husband, so I'm still in these shitholes. Any happening inside?
Yeah, two wounded.
2 wounded.
1 old.
The grim toll of war in Sarajevo. 10,000 dead, 55,000 wounded. No electricity, few supplies, and half the doctors and nurses are gone. Yet in what must be the most photographed war in history, the images have become numbing, and there's a sense of futility among the journalists. There's agony at the slaughter and fear of exploiting the misery.
There's a danger for a lot of people whose careers have taken off here to say that we have, in some way, because of this horrific situation, profited. But I think there's a horrible truth to that. There's her husband in there.
Journalists cannot share the real suffering here, but they share some of the risk. 43 have died in Bosnia, and many have been wounded. Each time it affects them all. CNN camerawoman Margaret Moth was shot in the face by a sniper. Maggie O'Kane remembers.
Of all the 8 people who've been injured or killed, and I never knew her, that frightened me more than anything. And the thing that frightened me about it was the idea of losing your face, really, and the idea of 10 years' time when you can't say Sarajevo, no matter what. Well, maybe you can when they finish putting your face together, but that's the real terror. And I wonder then what I say to myself, you silly bitch, what were you after? Why did you keep going back?
When she arrived in Bosnia, Maggie O'Kane was a 29-year-old freelance journalist with $200 in her pocket, but she had a passion to be there despite the risk. Within months, her work earned her a top job at The Guardian, and later Britain's Journalist of the Year award.
But now I'm not so sure if I want to walk those mountains again or take those kind of risks. So I think in another war, I would be a lot more cautious. In a sense, the good journalism was done at times when we felt very passionately about it.
Sometimes I thought, what am I doing here? It's not my war, it's not my people, it's why? Why me here? For myself? Because I don't think we can... I don't see myself as a witness. I just do it because I think it's interesting. It's interesting because it's a tragedy in Europe now, in this end of century, and it shouldn't have happened, and it happened. For me, it's good to see it, it's good to know about it, makes me think, makes me understand more about human beings somehow. What kind of contraceptive?
Alexandra Boulet probes for intimate, revealing details.
Nothing. They don't use contraceptive in Sarajevo. No.
She thinks being a woman journalist is an advantage.
The relationship with the woman and the subject is different, of course. I think it's more soft, and I think they can get some more.
You have tremendous access, especially if you're a woman and you're on your own, because they think it's a bit weird, but are incredibly hospitable and sort of want to bring you into their homes, and it does give you a great insight.
Maggie O'Kane's stories have truly revealed the view from the ground. She's traveled through Bosnia by bus or hitchhiking.
I spent 1/2 day walking along the side of the road, trying to hitch and holding up this pathetic sign saying English journalist, which they all thought. And then I began to feel as helpless as the refugees did, because no one was going to give me a lift. It was like miles back to Sarajevo. And in those couple of hours, there was a sense of absolute kind of despair, which I think is quite a good thing to feel if you're trying to talk about how people in Bosnia are feeling.
I've been the object of considerable criticism, and by people who feel not at all worried by making these criticisms, that, she's emotional, it's sentimental, it's absolutely overcommitted. Of course, because she's a woman. That's sometimes not actually said, but there it is, implied. All the time. All the time. It's a great put-down. Nothing is ever simple here.
Kate Adie, the BBC's chief news correspondent, has covered every major conflict since 1979. She's been known to drive an armored car and dig her own trench, and she's unafraid to add a human touch to her reports.
I'm less sentimental than men. I find some men very sentimental. Wittering on about things. Snivelling reports, where you really have to say, come. And what it is in some instances is the fact is they can't cope with their own emotion because they're not used to it and they're embarrassed by it. So it all sort of dribbles out in this sentimental stuff. I'm not sentimental. I bring emotions to reporting. I wouldn't be human if I didn't.
It's nice to be in an armored car today and not in Dragon's Gulf. A lot of times with the men, you don't want to let your guard down and you don't want to appear vulnerable, and you want to be, even if you're not, and you're not, as tough as them. You do gravitate towards women. There's a kind of emotional level that you need to hook up with someone.
Her first war story would scoop every journalist in Europe.
I rang Robin Hangley from the consul's house and said, Robin, the war's begun. And he said, are you sure, old girl? The sort of language of the age. And I said, yes, can't you hear it? And I put the telephone out of the window. And he said, well, you better get out of Katowice pretty quickly.
Claire Hollingworth of the Daily Telegraph crossed no man's land in Poland with only a bottle of champagne to sustain her.
Oh, we were often near bombed, I was naive, remember. I was very interested in the story. I thought I knew a bit about war, but I didn't really. And of course, I could have been captured and been in prison all through the war. But that never occurred to me. I mean, I was just anxious to be as near to the story as I could.
Claire Hollingworth was one of a handful of women reporters to get to the front lines in World War II. She covered Romania and North Africa before her husband divorced her for desertion.
I think danger is very stimulating. I crossed a bridge and we were fired at. They didn't hit the bridge or us. But that danger is stimulating.
Hollingworth has chronicled half a century of conflict, including Vietnam, the first war in which women journalists were seriously accepted. Edie Lederer of the Associated Press was one. Now 50, she has covered wars in the Middle East and Somalia, to name a few. She has a fatalistic attitude, loads of stamina, and friends call her indestructible. She remembers the early days in Vietnam.
I remember when I went out on the USS America, the aircraft carrier, they were so petrified about having women on board, and they couldn't say no because we were bona fide correspondents. I got locked in prison sick bay with a guard standing outside my door all night because I guess they were worried about what would happen with these 5,000 sailors on the ship.
My boss came to me and said at one point, "Sorry, we're not going to send you." And I said, "Okay, but why?" And the cameraman, who was one of the more senior cameramen, had come to him and said, "I know Ann is good. I, respect her as a reporter, but if she comes along, I'm going to be more worried about taking care of her than doing my job at the story."
This old man has lost one relative, his shop, his home, and his life savings.
Ann Medina of the CBC was sent to Beirut 3 years later by a new boss. There she gained a reputation for explaining the complex, brutal war on a human level. She spent months at a time there during the heaviest fighting for more than 3 years.
The Palestinians say they're going to stay in Beirut, and they may have to, with a lot of bombs dropping on them. For the Journal, this is Ann Medina in Beirut.
I have a feeling that somebody said, wouldn't it be sexy to have a woman out there? So I think rather than fighting for it, and I certainly am not one that fights to go into danger zones or the macho stories or whatever, but far from it being a problem, I think it was an advantage.
It was different for Martha Teichner of CBS. In the beginning, her bosses wouldn't even entertain the idea of sending a woman to Lebanon. When she finally did get there, it opened a new door in her career. In the past decade, she's reported from South Africa to Sarajevo.
Left of his men and nothing left of Tripoli. Martha Teichner, CBS News, Tripoli.
I never felt, what am I doing here? I knew exactly what I was doing there. I was evening the score. I was validating myself. I was finally putting myself in a position where I hoped in the future no one would ask questions about whether I was a man or a woman.
I think sometimes when you have a woman telling a story, like in a war, people will sort of, "Is that a woman? Hey, Mabel, there's a woman on. And start, you see that woman there?" And Mabel will come in and Mabel will say, "Oh, I hope she's okay. I hope she's okay." And there'll be an empathy.
It brought home a lot of the sort of heightened sense of danger and nature and the nature of the war in Beirut because it was me.
The British public empathized with Kate Adie. By the onset of the Gulf War, she was a veteran of 12 years of war coverage and a household name. But at 46 years old, in the deserts of Saudi Arabia and Iraq, sheer physical exhaustion would prove the enemy.
And I felt like death warmed up. And it was 18-hour days. And I was considerably older than most of the young men. There were young men around me. I was old enough to be their mother. I kept telling them that. And I found it physically quite difficult. But I kept saying to myself, well, if I throw in the towel, the women of England will take me out and crucify me because I've just got to do it. I'm going to have to show that. I said I would do it, so I'm going to. So I did.
Afghanistan has become a forgotten war, even though thousands of people are still dying here. Once the eye of the storm, it has been abandoned as a major news story. Lise Doucette, a Canadian journalist working for the BBC, lived in Afghanistan for 18 months during some of the worst fighting in the 80s. Her radio reports were broadcast throughout the region. At home, she became a familiar voice on CBC. At 35, Lise Doucette is single and nomadic, often living out of a suitcase for months at a time. The regions she works in aren't always lead stories, but often dangerous ones. The war in Chad, post-revolutionary Iran. But it's Afghanistan that has stolen her heart. She comes back often because she can't leave the story, or her friends.
Before he went, also Sharif died. You know? Your friend.
No!
By rocket.
So much of the world's attention was focused on Kabul because Kabul was very much a Cold War theatre. The West was concerned about it because it was a proxy war between the United States and the Soviet Union. There was a lot of drama connected to the situation. And in fact, when I think now, those were very dramatic days for the journalist community. But many Afghans fear that as the Soviets are on their way out and that the world's media is following them and the Western missions have closed, that most people aren't going to care. For the Journal, this is Lise Doucette in Kabul. So going to the Intercont was, for me, was like going home. And obviously during the height of the war, or at that period of the war when Soviet troops were about to leave, it was chock-a-block with journalists. But they came and went, and I made my home there. I got a lot of attention from the staff. They made me feel like it was home. Is the hotel is open?
No. Now it's open, but
It's
no
open.
guests.
Yes.
Nobody here.
But it is open now? It is okay?
Yes.
But the rooms, they are all destroyed?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
But there is some rooms that are okay?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
But no electric, but
No electric.
Water.
No electric, no hot water.
Hot water.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Sharif is
Dead.
dead.
Cool. It was very sad coming back to Kabul this time. The last time I was here was almost a year ago, and there were certain friends that I spent time with, commanders, ordinary people. And the extraordinary thing is that a lot of these people, more than I can count on one hand, have now died. Even so, there are things that still bring joy, that people are still managing to live, to carry on with their lives, to educate their children, very haphazardly, but educate them, and still managing to survive despite the very difficult circumstances.
Everywhere there are signs of 14 years of fighting. It's still a proxy war, only now warring factions are funded by opposing Islamic states. The country is awash with weapons. The very ground is an explosive bed of 10 million landmines. They approach the base camp of Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, a faction leader who has locked horns with the president and at times the BBC.
After many months or years.
Well, you know, you told me I couldn't come to Afghanistan, so I didn't come to see you.
Please.
And welcome.
Okay, you are welcome.
Yes,
Please.
definitely. Thank you.
Please.
But these death threats now, they are not. You have looked at them?
Who?
The death threats that you made against the BBC, against me and Mirwais and Hamid Elmi.
Nothing has been done.
But you made.
There's no threat.
You made a threat on your
No.
radio. You have said that any foreigners working for the BBC would be arrested, and that any Afghan working for the BBC must be killed.
No.
You deny it. He put out one of the worst threats that we've ever had from Mr. Hekmatyar, and there have been many from him. But this time he put it on his own media, which meant that every gun-toting, sometimes quite extreme member of his party would have heard this threat, would have believed that this was a word from the leader and that they should carry it out. And so the BBC angers, should we go, should we not go? Should we be seen to confront the authority of Mr. Hekmatyar? And again, it's a power game. We can't be cowed by him. The women who I talk to now are not satisfied because you have been firing rockets into Kabul, especially last year.
I think it is very clear to all citizens of Kabul who has fired the rockets to Kabul. So please go and see which areas were destroyed.
But it's undeniable that you fired rockets.
I ask
You can't deny that.
please.
You used to deny that you didn't get any weapons
Please,
from
you go and
the Americans.
see which part of Kabul was destroyed.
Yes, but
And
I
from that, you should see who was responsible to destroy Kabul city. Thank you very much.
Did you give good answers?
Mirwais Jalil, the BBC fixer, has worked with Lise Doucette since he was 16 and has often taken flack for it.
He never admits to anything. Sorry. He never admits to anything.
I came under pressure from different people They were telling me that why I came with a women journalist. It's such a shame for you as an Afghan. So then I was defending myself that, look, in European countries, men and women are equal. They have the same right to come and work in the field. But unfortunately, in Afghanistan, it is different. You don't like to allow your women to work or to come outside of their houses.
How are you? چند بچه دارید؟
Only female journalists have access to Muslim women and families, and this gives them another view of war. This is Feda, her former driver and his family. During the past year, they have been hiding in Kabul, moving from house to house. Until now, she's had no news of their safety.
I was worried, you know, I heard about all this rockets. I didn't know where the rockets were, whether your family was okay.
We about 6 days we living. Just for eating, sometimes we come in here for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, rockets come, then we go. Like
In this house?
For this house, for this places. One rocket has come for backside in the house near the road. We come now.
I went to see Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. I told him the ladies in Kabul are very angry that you are shooting rockets. He says, I never shoot rockets.
گلبدین خوبه عربانی.
This relationship goes back more than 5 years. Far behind the headlines, in the daily lives and anxieties of her friends, war is reduced to simple survival.
Feda was my driver, and he had a great sense of humor. He also had a great insight, a very ordinary insight, I suppose, but he knew how Afghans were suffering. He could tell me about the daily lives of people, which was quite important to me. He became a friend. I think it's very difficult for family members, for friends who haven't been to these cultures to understand the reality of it. My parents have worried. It has helped somewhat that when I'm in these places, I also try to report for the CBC, so that if my parents wake up in the morning and hear my voice on the radio, they know I'm well. And in some way it helps them, at least to give them a bit of insight into what I'm doing. Not a school, not a house that has been left standing. They're pockmarked and gutted by the rockets and artillery, which were fired this year in some of the worst fighting ever seen in the city. And it's these symbols, these tragic symbols, which leave many Afghans pessimistic about the chances for peace in this city.
Kabul's press corps, 3 resident journalists and Lise Doucette, are flown to the front in what one journalist describes as a flying coffin.
You are put, I think, into impossible situations, and the difficulty as well, and we used to discuss this endlessly in Kabul. Should we take a military aircraft? Should we take a helicopter, which are very badly maintained, which safety record is not good, to a certain area where there could possibly be a big story? As soon as one journalist decides, yes, I'm going, the other journalists have no choice.
6 months ago, a helicopter crash killed a friend, Sharon Herzog of the Associated Press. They land in Tagal, a strategic town that has been won, lost, and regained by government forces in 1 week alone. When she went to Afghanistan, it was difficult to convince the Mujahideen to take her to the front lines. They'd tell her there were no bathrooms, it was no place for a woman. But she was pushy, and they wanted the coverage, and eventually she won their trust. Over the years, she's traveled with them through their valleys and deserts, trying to understand the passions and the politics, trying to lift the shrouds of military mystique.
Depends on who you talk to.
This is it.
This is the bazaar, yeah.
But this is it, Tugop Town,
Yeah.
nothing else.
I guess. I've not been here before.
Well, what's the, I mean, it's not very much, is it?
Well, the town itself doesn't matter. It's
Well, if you notice this valley...
This is on the way to the, I mean...
This valley, I mean, you can...
It's a supply route.
John Jenkins of the Associated Press is an old friend and a military buff.
I had military training. Working in a war is like working in any other situation. You have to learn how to avoid getting caught in crossfire. There's still a lot I don't know about this, but I have worked with male colleagues who know a lot more than me. And I appreciate the fact. I don't find it sexist or chauvinist. I don't find it offensive.
It's not been the doctor.
If I go with men to meet a commander, there's all kind of, show of force. Men are men, and among the boys, if you like. And, I take part in it as well, the joshing, the joking. But when they sit down with a woman, I think they're very aware that, I am a woman. I've had commanders talking about their dreams, about their wishes. I've had them talking to me about the things that how they've suffered. Basically pouring their heart out because it's an outlet for them. And do it with a woman and not a man. And I think I have got access to the other side of their soul, if you like. Mabubsha, چند سال هستی؟
9 ساله.
9 ساله؟
آره.
آها. چی؟ You're gonna have to take off his foot?
Ja. کجا کار میکنه؟ So دارد. In her cellar.
Broke down in tears.